Friday morning started like any other day in our picture-perfect suburban Atlanta home, except for one tiny detail that made my coffee taste like battery acid. My wife Julia was hiding her phone like it contained nuclear launch codes. "Morning, sweetheart," I said, watching her practically slam her iPhone face down on the granite countertop when I walked into the kitchen. Nothing suspicious about that whatsoever. "Oh, hi, Nate." Julia's smile looked like she'd practiced it in the mirror for a hostage video. "You're up early. It's 7:30, same time I get up every weekday for the past 6 years." I poured my coffee, noting how she positioned herself between me and her phone like a Secret Service agent. "Big plans for the weekend? Just, girl stuff with Trina." She grabbed her phone and clutched it to her chest. "You wouldn't be interested." Girl stuff. Right. Because nothing says innocent girls' night like acting like a Russian spy at breakfast. I'm Nate Archer, 41 years old, IT security specialist, and apparently the most oblivious husband in Georgia, according to the growing pile of evidence. For months, Julia had been treating me like I was radioactive. Late nights at the office, mysterious phone calls she'd take in the garage, and a sudden interest in yoga classes that somehow never improved her flexibility but did wonders for her attitude. Toward everyone except me. "Stop interrogating me about my plans." She snapped when I asked if she wanted to grab dinner Saturday night. "God, Nate, you're so controlling. Can't I have any freedom in this marriage?" Controlling. For asking about dinner. In our own house. With my own wife. That's when something inside me shifted. Not broke, shifted, like a gear finally clicking into place after years of grinding. "You know what, Julia? You're absolutely right." I set down my coffee mug with deliberate calm. "I should stop caring so much about what you do." Her eyes narrowed. She knew that tone. It was my IT voice. The one I used when I'd found the exact source of a security breach and was about to shut it down permanently. I walked upstairs, opened my laptop, and did 3 things in rapid succession. First, I disabled location sharing on all our joint accounts. Second, I booked a flight to Miami, leaving in 4 hours. Third, I wrote a note and left it on her pillow. "You said not to care. I'm not caring. Gone to Miami for the weekend. See you Monday. Nate." By noon, I was sipping a mojito on South Beach, watching waves crash while my phone buzzed with increasingly frantic texts from Julia. I turned it off and ordered another drink. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. Miami was everything our marriage wasn't. Warm, honest, and relaxing. I got a massage, ate Cuban food that didn't come with a side of passive-aggressive commentary, and walked the beach without someone sighing dramatically every 5 minutes. It was like being human again. Sunday night, I flew back to Atlanta feeling better than I had in months. Maybe Julia and I could work this out. Maybe her little tantrum about freedom was just stress, and my impromptu vacation would reset things between us. I should have stayed in Miami. "You went to Miami without telling me?" Julia was standing in our living room when I walked in, and she looked like she wanted to set me on fire with her mind. "What the heck is wrong with you? I left a note. And I did tell you. I asked about dinner plans, remember? You said I was being controlling." I set down my suitcase. "How was your girls' weekend with Trina?" Something flickered across her face. Guilt? Fear? Hard to tell in the dim lighting, but it was definitely something. "Fine, it was fine." She crossed her arms. "We went out, talked, girl stuff." "Where'd you go?" "Why does it matter? You were in Miami, living your best life without your wife." "I asked you to come with me once, last month. You said traveling together was suffocating." "That's different." "How?" "Because..." She struggled for words, which was unusual for Julia. She was a PR manager. Words were her tool of choice. "Because I needed space to think. About us, about what I want." "And what do you want?" She looked me straight in the eye and said, "I've been seeing Mason again." Mason Trent. Her ex-boyfriend from college. The guy she'd dated before we met, who she'd described as charming but unreliable and too much drama. Apparently, drama was back on the menu. "Seeing him how?" I asked, though my stomach already knew the answer. "We've been reconnecting. He's different now. He's in AA, working on himself. He needs support, and I've been helping him through his recovery." She lifted her chin defiantly. "We slept together Friday night and Saturday. I'm helping him fight his alcoholism, Nate. It's meaningful work." Something you'd never understand because you never change, never grow, never challenge yourself. The room went very quiet. I could hear the refrigerator humming in the kitchen, the neighbor's dog barking, and the sound of my marriage exploding like a controlled demolition. "You're having an affair," I said. "I'm supporting someone who needs me." "By sleeping with him. It's complicated. It's adultery. It's growth, Nate, something you should try." I pulled out my phone and opened our family group chat. The one with her parents, my parents, her sister, and my brother. Everyone who'd attended our wedding 7 years ago. Everyone who still asked how we were doing at Christmas dinner. "What are you doing?" Julia's voice went up an octave. I typed, "Hi, everyone. Julia wanted you to know she's been sleeping with her ex-boyfriend Mason to help with his alcoholism. She says it's meaningful work and growth. She also thinks I'm too controlling for asking about dinner plans, which is why I spent the weekend in Miami alone. Just wanted to keep the family updated on how we're doing. Nate." "Don't you dare send that." Julia lunged for my phone. I hit send. Within 30 seconds, both our phones started ringing. Julia's mother, my mother, her sister, my brother. The family group chat exploded with messages ranging from confused question marks to her sister's, "What the actual heck, Julia?" Julia stared at her buzzing phone like it was a live grenade. "You bastard. You absolute bastard. I am not the one sleeping with my ex and calling it therapy. You've ruined everything." "No, sweetheart. You did that Friday night. I just made sure everyone knows about your growth." I picked up my suitcase and headed for the door. Julia was crying now, ugly sobs that might have moved me a week ago. Now they just sounded like the soundtrack to 7 years of wasted time. "Where are you going?" I turned back to look at her. Really look at her. When had she become this person? When had the woman I married turned into someone who could cheat and then lecture me about personal growth? "I'm filing for divorce Monday morning. This time, my whole family will stand by me." I walked out, leaving her with a house full of ringing phones and a group chat that would be screenshot and forwarded through our social circle faster than a viral TikTok. My phone buzzed with a text from my brother. "Holy crap, dude, are you okay? Mom's freaking out. Dad wants Mason's address." I smiled for the first time since landing in Atlanta. Maybe I wasn't as alone as I thought. The extended stay hotel near my office had all the charm of a dentist's waiting room, but at least nobody there was sleeping with their ex-boyfriend for personal growth. I'd been living there for 3 days, surviving on room service and the kind of righteous anger that burns clean and bright. My phone hadn't stopped ringing since Sunday night. Julia's mother had called to discuss this misunderstanding. Apparently, adultery was just a communication breakdown in her world. My mother had called to offer emotional support and Dad's baseball bat. Julia's sister had called to apologize and ask if I needed anything. The answer was yes, a time machine to go back and marry literally anyone else. Wednesday morning, I called my best friend Lucas Rivera. Lucas was ex-Atlanta PD, now a private investigator, and the kind of guy who could find dirt on a saint. If anyone could help me navigate this mess, it was him. "Jesus Christ, Nate," he said when I filled him in over coffee at our usual diner. "She really said sleeping with her ex was helping his sobriety?" Direct quote. Apparently, I lack the emotional sophistication to understand therapeutic adultery. That's the biggest load of BS shit I've heard since my last divorce case. Lucas stirred his coffee thoughtfully. "You want me to look into this Mason character? See what kind of recovery he's really doing?" "Can you do that legally?" "Everything I do is legal. Some of it's just more creative than others." By Thursday, Lucas had a preliminary report that made my morning coffee taste like victory. Mason Trent wasn't just a recovering alcoholic, he was a barely functioning one. 3 DUIs in the past 5 years, 2 stints in rehab, and a job history that looked like a game of professional hopscotch. His current employment at a small PR firm was hanging by a thread, and his AA sponsor was a guy named Pete who took recovery very seriously. "Here's the interesting part," Lucas said, sliding a folder across my desk. "Your wife's been picking up his bar tabs." "What?" "I followed them Friday night. They went to 3 different bars in Virginia Highland. She paid every time, and he was definitely not ordering club soda." The photos Lucas had taken were like a punch to the gut and a gift from God simultaneously. Julia and Mason at a high-top table, him with a whiskey, her with wine, both looking very cozy. Another shot of them outside the 3rd bar, Julia steadying Mason as he stumbled toward his Porsche. A final image of Julia taking his keys and driving while he passed out in the passenger seat. So much for his sobriety, I muttered. Gets better. I talked to a bartender at the second place, and apparently they're regulars. She comes in every Friday, meets him there, and they drink until closing. The staff thinks they're married. They think Julia's married to Mason. She's been using his last name, Julia Trent. Even has a fake wedding ring she wears on Friday nights. The room tilted slightly. Not only was my wife cheating, she was playing house with her boyfriend and pretending I didn't exist. The therapeutic adultery story was just for my benefit, to make me feel like the bad guy for objecting to her extracurricular activities. There's more, Lucas continued. Mason's living way beyond his means. That Porsche? Leased? The fancy apartment? 6 months behind on rent? The designer clothes? Credit cards maxed out? Your wife isn't just sleeping with him. She's bankrolling his entire lifestyle. With our money. With your money. I sat back in my chair, processing this information. Julia wasn't just having an affair. She was funding it. Every Friday night bender, every expensive dinner, every piece of Mason's carefully crafted image was coming out of our joint accounts while she lectured me about being controlling. What do you want to do about it? Lucas asked. I want to make sure Mason gets the help he really needs. That evening, I drove to Mason's usual Friday night haunt, a trendy bar called Prohibition in Virginia Highland. Lucas had given me Mason's schedule. He usually arrived around 8, drank alone until Julia showed up at 9, then they'd make their rounds. Tonight, I wanted a private conversation. I found him at the bar, nursing what looked like his third whiskey and checking his phone constantly. He was exactly what Julia had described years ago, handsome in a generic way, with the kind of practiced charm that worked on bartenders and lonely wives. He wore expensive clothes that didn't quite hide the slight tremor in his hands or the tired eyes. I sat 2 stools down and ordered a beer. Rough week? I asked casually. He glanced over, not recognizing me. Something like that. You? My wife's been working late a lot. PR job, you know how it is. Yeah, I work in PR too. Demanding industry. He took another sip of whiskey. What's your wife's name? Might know her. Julia Archer. Mason choked on his drink. Literally choked, coughing and sputtering while his face went 3 different shades of red. When he finally recovered, he was staring at me like I'd grown a second head. You're Nate, and you're the guy who's been helping my wife grow as a person. Look, man, I can explain in the bathroom, now. I stood up and walked toward the men's room, not looking back. After a moment, I heard Mason's stool scrape against the floor as he followed. The bathroom was empty, which was perfect. I turned to face Mason, who looked like he wanted to crawl into one of the urinals and disappear. Here's what's going to happen, I said quietly. You're going to stop seeing my wife, you're going to stop taking her money, and you're going to get the help you actually need, not the kind that involves sleeping with married women. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. You're a drunk who found a sugar mama, and she's having a midlife crisis. It's not complicated. Julia loves me. Julia loves the idea of saving someone. You're just convenient. Mason's jaw tightened. She said you were controlling. She also said you were sober. We both know how honest Julia's been lately. I stepped closer, not threatening, just making my presence felt. You ever touch my wife again? I'll make your next AA meeting a police lineup. Are we clear? Mason's face went pale. You can't threaten me. I'm not threatening you. I'm promising you. There's a difference. He backed toward the door, hands shaking worse now. Julia won't let you. Julia doesn't get a vote anymore. Mason practically ran out of the bathroom. I waited a few minutes, then followed. By the time I got back to the bar, he was gone, leaving a 20 on the bar and a half-finished whiskey. His keys were still on the bar top. Apparently, he'd been too rattled to remember them. I pocketed the keys and walked outside. Mason's Porsche was parked in the valet area, gleaming under the streetlights. I pulled out my phone and took a few pictures, then called Lucas. I need you to contact Mason's AA sponsor, I said. I think Pete needs to know about his sponsee's Friday night routine. What did you do, Nate? I had a conversation, a very educational conversation. I looked at the Porsche keys in my hand, then at the car. Mason was probably calling an Uber right now, panicking about his confrontation with the angry husband. He'd be back for his car tomorrow, hungover and embarrassed. But tomorrow was a long way away, and I had some shopping to do. The 24-hour Walmart on Ponce had an excellent selection of bumper stickers, and I was feeling creative. By midnight, Mason's Porsche was decorated with 12 I Hearts Vodka bumper stickers, a honk if you're drunk decal on the rear window, and a small flask duct taped to the hood with a note, "In case of emergency, break sobriety." I took photos of my handiwork and sent them to Lucas with a message. "Please forward these to Pete, the AA sponsor. Mason might need additional support." Then I went back to my hotel room and slept better than I had in months. Friday morning, my phone rang at 6 a.m. Julia, screaming, "You're stalking us! This is harassment! Good morning to you too, sweetheart. How was your therapeutic session last night?" "You know exactly how it went. Mason told me what you did." "What did I do? You threatened him." "I offered him some friendly advice about sobriety." "Isn't that what you'd want? For someone to support his recovery?" "You vandalized his car." "I decorated it. There's a difference. Besides, shouldn't someone in recovery be proud of their commitment to sobriety?" "You're insane." "No, Julia. I'm just making sure you both get the help you need." I hung up and turned off my phone. It was going to be a beautiful day. Julia's next move was as predictable as a rom-com ending. By Monday morning, she'd filed for exclusive use of our house, claiming I was mentally unstable and potentially dangerous. Her evidence? My impromptu Miami vacation and the fact that I'd confronted her boyfriend in a bar bathroom. Apparently, asking someone to stop sleeping with your wife was now considered threatening behavior. Her lawyer was a shark named Patricia Vance, who specialized in painting husbands as controlling monsters. I'd seen her work before. She could make Gandhi look like a domestic terrorist if the retainer was big enough, and "Archer," she'd said during our first mediation session, "my client feels unsafe in her own home. Your erratic behavior and stalking of her friend Mason Trent has created a hostile environment." "Friend?" I'd replied. "Is that what we're calling adultery now?" Julia had actually blushed. "Mason and I have a meaningful connection that you could never understand." "I understand it perfectly. It's called cheating." The mediator, a tired-looking woman named Sandra Webb, had rubbed her temples like she could feel a migraine coming. "Let's focus on the immediate housing situation." I'd agreed to move out temporarily, partly because I was already living at the hotel, and partly because I had bigger plans brewing. Julia could have the house for now. I was playing a longer game. Lucas had spent the weekend digging deeper into Mason's background, and what he'd found was better than Christmas morning. Mason wasn't just financially irresponsible, he was creatively dishonest about it. "Check this out," Lucas said, spreading photos across my hotel room desk. "Mason's been telling people he's a successful PR executive, right? Well, his executive position is actually junior account coordinator at a firm that handles mattress stores and used car lots. Classy. Gets better. He's been padding his expense reports for months, claiming client dinners that were actually his bar crawls with your wife. His boss is starting to ask questions." The photos showed Mason's credit card statements, his employment records, and a series of increasingly desperate emails to various creditors. The man was drowning financially, and Julia was his only life preserver. "There's just something else," Lucas continued. "I followed him Saturday night after your little bathroom chat. He went straight to another bar, called Julia Crying, and proceeded to drink himself stupid. She had to come pick him up at midnight. So much for my intervention inspiring sobriety. Yeah, well, it inspired something. Look at this." Lucas handed me a printed email. It was from Pete, Mason's AA sponsor, to Mason himself. "Mason, I received some disturbing photos of your vehicle and information about your Friday night activities. We need to meet immediately. Your sobriety is clearly in jeopardy, and I'm considering whether I can continue as your sponsor. The program only works if you work it. Pete." Mason's response was even better, Lucas said, handing me another printout. "Pete, those photos are fake. Julia's crazy husband is trying to sabotage my recovery. I haven't had a drink in 3 months. Can we meet next week instead? I'm dealing with some family drama right now. Mason." "Family drama," I repeated. "That's what I am now." It's about to get worse for him. I may have mentioned to a few people at his office that Mason's been seen drinking heavily at local bars. Word travels fast in the PR world. "Lucas, you beautiful bastard. I prefer ethically flexible private investigator, but I'll take it." That evening, I decided to test Julia's claim that I was stalking them. If I was going to be accused of surveillance, I might as well do it properly. I parked across the street from Prohibition and waited. Julia arrived first, which was unusual. She sat at their regular table, checking her phone and looking agitated. When Mason showed up 20 minutes later, he looked like he'd been hit by a truck. Even from across the street, I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way he kept glancing around like he expected me to jump out of the shadows. They argued. Not the playful banter of new lovers, but a real fight with hand gestures and raised voices. Julia was clearly upset, probably about the AA sponsor situation. Mason kept shaking his head and pointing toward the street, toward where I was parked. Then, something interesting happened. Mason pulled out a small flask and took a drink right there at the table. Julia grabbed it from him and they struggled over it briefly before she stormed off toward the bathroom. That's when Mason made his mistake. He saw my car. I don't know how he spotted me. Maybe the streetlight hit my windshield wrong, or maybe paranoia had sharpened his vision. But he definitely saw me, because he stood up so fast he knocked over his chair and started walking quickly toward the parking garage next to the bar. I gave him a 30-second head start, then followed. The parking garage was one of those old concrete structures with low ceilings and poor lighting, perfect for a conversation between a cheating drunk and a wronged husband. I could hear Mason's footsteps echoing off the walls as he tried to find his car, probably forgetting that his Porsche was still in the shop getting my bumper stickers removed. "Looking for something?" I called out, my voice bouncing off the concrete. Mason spun around, wild-eyed and breathing hard. "Stay away from me." "Relax, Mason. I just want to talk." "You're crazy. Julia was right about you." "What exactly did Julia tell you about me?" He backed against a concrete pillar, clutching his flask like a security blanket. "She said you were controlling, jealous, that you'd probably try to hurt me. And yet here you are, drinking in public while your AA sponsor thinks you're 3 months sober. Who's really the dangerous one here? That's none of your business. It became my business when you started sleeping with my wife." Mason took another drink from his flask, and I realized he was more drunk than I'd initially thought. His words were slightly slurred, and he was swaying on his feet. "She doesn't love you," he said, trying to sound confident. "She told me your marriage has been over for years." "Then why hasn't she filed for divorce?" Because she's trying to be nice about it. She doesn't want to hurt you by sleeping with you instead. Very considerate. You don't understand what we have. I understand perfectly. You're broke, drunk, and desperate. She's bored, guilty, and paying for everything. It's not love, Mason. It's a transaction." His face flushed red. "You're wrong." "Am I? When's the last time you paid for dinner or drinks or anything?" Mason's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. We both knew the answer. "Here's what's going to happen," I continued. "You're going to get in whatever car you came here in, hopefully not driving, since you're obviously drunk, and you're going to disappear from Julia's life. Tonight. She won't let me go. She won't have a choice." I pulled out my phone and showed him the photos Lucas had taken of their bar crawls, the credit card statements, the emails to creditors. "Your boss is going to find this very interesting. So is your AA sponsor. And Julia's family, who still think you're a reformed alcoholic helping their daughter grow as a person." Mason's face went white. "You can't do this." "I'm not doing anything. You did this when you decided to screw my wife and lie about being sober." "Please," he whispered. "I'll lose everything. You already have. You just don't know it yet." I turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, and Mason, if I ever see you within a mile of Julia again, these photos go viral. Your boss, your sponsor, your family, everyone in Atlanta's PR community. They'll all get to see what a reformed alcoholic really looks like." I walked away, leaving him slumped against the concrete pillar with his flask and his shattered illusions. By the time I got back to the street, Julia was outside the bar, looking around frantically. She spotted me getting into my car and marched over, her face twisted with rage. "What did you do to him?" "I had a conversation about sobriety and personal responsibility. Growth. He's not answering his phone. Maybe he's reflecting on our discussion." Julia slapped me, hard, right there on the sidewalk with a dozen people watching. "Thank you," I said, touching my stinging cheek. "I was wondering what I missed during my weekend in Miami." "You bastard! You keep saying that. I'm starting to think you mean it as a compliment." Several people had their phones out, recording our little domestic drama. Julia noticed and tried to grab one of them, which only made the situation worse. Within minutes, someone had posted the video to the neighborhood social media group with the caption, "Cheating wife attacks husband on Virginia Highland." Julia saw the post and lost what remained of her composure. "You planned this. You wanted people to see. I wanted a quiet evening at home with my wife. But since that wasn't an option, public humiliation works too. I got in my car and drove away, leaving Julia standing on the sidewalk with a crowd of strangers and their cameras. My phone was already buzzing with notifications from the neighborhood group, comments, shares, and a surprising amount of support from people who'd apparently been waiting years for someone to call Julia out on her behavior. The best comment came from our next-door neighbor. About time someone stood up to that woman. We all knew she was trouble. Apparently, I wasn't the only one who'd noticed Julia's transformation. The whole neighborhood had been watching our marriage implode, and they weren't on her side. Back at my hotel, I poured a drink and called Lucas. "How'd it go?" he asked. "Mason's having a spiritual crisis in a parking garage. Julia assaulted me on camera, and the neighborhood thinks I'm a hero. All in all, a successful evening. What's next? Now we wait. Mason's going to crack, Julia's going to panic, and her perfect little affair is going to collapse like a house of cards. And then," I smiled, thinking about the look on Mason's face when he realized his sugar mama couldn't save him from the consequences of his choices. Then we watched them both burn. The neighborhood social media group had turned into my personal cheering section overnight. The video of Julia slapping me had been shared 47 times, with comments ranging from supportive, "You deserve better, Nate," to vindictive, "I always knew she was a cheater." My favorite came from Mrs. Patterson, the 70-year-old retired teacher who lived 3 houses down. That woman has been trouble since day one. Good riddance to bad rubbish. Julia's reputation was cracking faster than ice in summer, and I hadn't even started trying yet. Monday morning brought unexpected entertainment in the form of a panicked call from Mason. Apparently, my parking garage intervention had inspired some serious soul-searching. "I can't do this anymore," he slurred into my voicemail at 6 a.m. "Julia's crazy, you're crazy, everyone's crazy. I'm done. Tell her I'm done." By 8 a.m., Julia was calling me, hysterical. "Mason won't answer his phone. What did you do to him?" I gave him some clarity about his situation. Apparently, it was very helpful. "He's not at work. He's not at home. Nobody's seen him. Maybe he's at an AA meeting. Actually working on his recovery instead of just talking about it. This is your fault. My fault that your boyfriend finally realized what everyone else already knew. That you're using him for entertainment and he's using you for money." She hung up on me, which was becoming a habit. Lucas called an hour later with an update that made my morning coffee taste like victory. "Mason's car got repossessed last night," he said cheerfully. "Turns out, when you miss 3 payments in a row, the finance company gets cranky." How did they find it so fast? I may have provided them with some helpful information about his regular locations, as a concerned citizen. You beautiful, devious bastard. It gets better. His boss called him in for a meeting this morning about those suspicious expense reports. Word is, he's getting fired. Today? Right now, probably. I have a friend who works there. She's texting me updates in real time. I sat back in my hotel room chair, marveling at how quickly Mason's carefully constructed life was falling apart. All it had taken was a little sunlight on his activities, and the whole structure had collapsed. "There's more," Lucas continued. "Julia's boss wants to see her this afternoon. Apparently, someone sent him some very interesting photos of her Friday night activities. Someone? Anonymous tip. Very public-spirited citizen, I'm sure." Julia's boss was Richard Manning, a straight-laced family man who ran his PR firm like a military operation. He was also married to Julia's cousin Sarah, which made Julia's affair not just a professional embarrassment, but a family scandal. Richard took a dim view of employees who brought drama into the workplace, especially when that drama involved cheating on their spouses with colleagues from competing firms. My phone rang. Julia again, but this time she wasn't hysterical. She was desperate. "Nate, please, we need to talk. We are talking. In person, this has gone too far." "Has it? Because from where I'm sitting, it's just getting started." "Richard wants to see me this afternoon. Someone sent him photos of me and Mason. Was that you?" "Why would I do that? I thought you were proud of your meaningful connection. Please, I'm begging you. Call off whatever you're doing." "I'm not doing anything, Julia. I'm just watching your choices catch up with you. I'll end it with Mason. I'll come home. We can work this out." "Too late for that. You made your choice when you decided to sleep with your ex-boyfriend and call it therapy. Now you get to live with the consequences. You're destroying my life." "No, sweetheart. You did that all by yourself. I'm just making sure everyone gets to see what you really are." I hung up and immediately called Lucas. "How's your friend's coverage of the Mason situation?" "He's cleaning out his desk as we speak. Fired for falsifying expense reports and conduct unbecoming. His boss was not impressed by the photos of him drinking with a married woman on the company's dime. And his AA sponsor? Pete dropped him this morning. Sent a very formal letter explaining that sponsorship requires honesty, and Mason's been lying about his sobriety for months. So Mason's unemployed, carless, and sponsorless, and about to be homeless. His landlord got tired of waiting for rent payments. I felt a brief moment of sympathy for Mason, then remembered him telling me that Julia didn't love me and that their affair was meaningful. Sympathy evaporated. What about Julia's meeting with her boss? That should be happening right about now. As if on cue, my phone buzzed with a text from Julia. I've been suspended pending investigation. Are you happy now? I texted back, ecstatic. How's Mason handling unemployment? She didn't respond. That evening, I decided to check on Julia's emotional state by driving past our house. What I found was better than I'd hoped. Mason's beat-up Honda Civic, apparently his backup car, was parked in our driveway. And through the living room window, I could see them having what looked like a very heated argument. I parked across the street and called Lucas. They're fighting, I reported. Big time. Lots of hand gestures and what appears to be crying. Both of them crying? Hard to tell from here, but Mason definitely looks like he's been hit by a truck. Julia's doing that thing where she paces and waves her arms around, probably blaming him for everything going wrong. Most likely. Oh, this is interesting. Mason just threw something. Looks like a glass. Trouble in paradise. Wait, he's leaving. Walking out the front door and getting in his car, and Julia's following him outside in her bathrobe. What happened next was pure gold. Julia, apparently not caring that the entire neighborhood could see her, started screaming at Mason in our front yard. She was wearing a silk bathrobe and fuzzy slippers. Her hair was a mess, and she looked like she'd been crying for hours. Mason, meanwhile, was trying to get in his car while she grabbed at his arm and shouted about abandonment and cowardice. Several neighbors had come out to watch the show, including Mrs. Patterson, who was recording everything on her phone. This is beautiful, I told Lucas. She's having a complete meltdown in front of God and everybody. Are you recording it? Don't need to. Half the neighborhood is doing it for me. Mason finally broke free and drove off, leaving Julia standing in our front yard in her bathrobe, sobbing. The neighbors slowly went back inside, but I could see curtains twitching in every window. By tomorrow, the whole subdivision would know that Julia's affair had imploded spectacularly. My phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Patterson. That woman is a disgrace. You're well rid of her. Then another from Tom, who lived 2 streets over. Dude, your wife just had a complete breakdown in your front yard. She okay? And another from Sarah, Julia's cousin. Nate, I'm so sorry. Richard told me what happened. We had no idea Julia was, we're here if you need anything. Even Julia's own family was turning against her. I drove back to my hotel feeling better than I had in years. Julia's perfect little affair was over. Mason's life was in ruins. And everyone in our social circle now knew exactly what kind of person my wife really was. But I wasn't done yet. Julia still had the house, her family's sympathy minus Sarah, and the ability to spin this story as my fault somehow. She was a PR professional, after all. Managing narratives was her specialty. Time to take away her ability to control the story. I called Lucas one more time. I need you to find out everything you can about Julia's finances, personal and professional. If she's been funding Mason's lifestyle, there might be some creative accounting involved. You think she's been embezzling? I think she's been spending our money on her boyfriend and calling it business expenses. There's a difference, but not much of one. I'll look into it. What else? Set up a meeting with that reporter from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, the one who covers local business scandals. You want to go public? I want to make sure the whole city knows what happens when you cheat on your spouse and lie about it. Julia wanted growth and freedom. Let's see how she handles being famous. Nate, are you sure about this? Once this hits the papers, there's no going back. I thought about Julia's smug face when she told me about sleeping with Mason, her lecture about personal growth, her claim that I was too controlling for asking about dinner plans, the way she'd made me feel like I was crazy for noticing her obvious affair. I'm sure Julia wanted everyone to know about her meaningful connection with Mason. I'm just helping her get the word out. Your call, but this is going to get messy. Lucas, my friend, it's already messy. I'm just making sure everyone can see the mess clearly. I hung up and poured myself a drink, thinking about tomorrow's headlines. Julia was about to learn the difference between managing someone else's reputation and managing your own when you're the scandal. It was going to be educational for everyone involved.